presenting an unbiased history of the world, brought to you by the World Government, with additional assistance by the World Government, produced by the World Government, written by the World Government, and fact-checked by, you guessed it, the World Government. Wow, aren't they awesome doing all these things for us at once? So in the beginning, about 1,000 years ago, the world was absolutely ravaged. I'm talking war, famine, death, ultra war, ultra famine, mega death. I'm pretty sure there were zombies in there somewhere, maybe a dinosaur or two. I mean, it was pretty bad, guys. It was absolutely everywhere. There was not a single peaceful place to live on the entire planet. Even chipmunks were fighting with each other, for God's sake. But then, our saviors, the 20 kings, came together to put an end to all of this violence and unify the world under a single flag. And that's where this story really gets interesting. And then after all of that nonsense, the world government was officially formed 800 years ago, and the world lived in a time of absolute peace and prosperity and kittens and rainbows until the end of time. Well, those pirates are causing problems right now, but don't worry, we'll take care of them, because we're the world government. We got your back! Nope. I'm sorry, guys. I was reading for a while trying to find something, but I just can't. Oh, wait, no. Nope, that's Napoleon. Again. What was with that guy anyway? He just kept fighting wars or something. He needed to take a chill pill. Napoleon needed a chill pill. Okay. Well, anyway, today's discussion is going to be all about the Void Century. We don't know anything about it. Alright, video's over. Later, guys! Now, although some people might say that, like, Tekking, how could you make a video about the Void Century? We literally don't know anything about the Void Century, that's why it's called the Void Century. After we find out what happened during it, it'll just be the century. That century. You know, that century show that we were talking about? Okay. I don't exactly know how Oda's gonna handle it, if it's gonna be like its own separate flashback arc. Honestly, I think that would be deserving, like if it gets its own like 20, 30 chapter flashback arc and we put ourselves in the perspective of like Joyboy or somebody that lived back then and that's the main character during that arc. I mean, I'd be fine with that. Or if he's just going to like have like some famous One Piece character like explain what happened during the Void Century, somebody that knows everything about it, maybe a member of the Roger Pirates or something like that. I don't know. Another way it could be done is maybe that the Straw Hats don't find out about it at all. Maybe Robin eventually does, but maybe we cut over to Marie-Joie where the Gorosei are sitting around and the Gorosei decide to tell the tale to somebody and that's how we find out about it. I don't know. But, yeah, Oda is really secretive about this. We just keep adding to the list of mysteries that involve the Void Century, things that we're going to find out about when we get there. You want to find out about that ancient kingdom that Professor Clover spoke about? Well, I guess you're just going to have to wait until the Void Century. You want to find out about the Will of D and how the Revolutionary Army probably got started? Void Century! You want to find out about Joyboy and the promise that he made with the previous ancient weapon Poseidon? Void Century! Shirahoshi's bra size? Probably the Void Century! So I guess the best that I can do about this, you know, some dipshit weeaboo on the internet, is just go down this list and give you my opinions of each one. At least I can organize in one, video, the things that we're going to find out eventually. Alright, well, let's start with the first one. Let's start with the Ancient Kingdom. That's just the first one I put on here. It's also sometimes referred to as the Great Kingdom. Okay, so the story with this, it's kind of weird. We are on Ohara, right? And Ohara is filled with scholars that were illegally studying the poneglyphs. The government finds out about this, they begin to nuke the island with a buster call, and CP9, at the time it was headed up by Spondine, who was Spondum's father. They arrive on the island, and they don't kill Clover and the scholars outright. You gotta give them at least a little bit credit there. Instead, Clover's like, I want to speak with the Gorosei, and he takes out a Den Mushi, and then he's connected with the Gorosei, and he has a few questions for them. And the Gorosei are you know, at first they're a little rational here. They're not just like, kill them all! No, the Gorosei are like, you know, Professor Clover, we know who you are. You seem to be a very adept scholar. It's kind of sucky that you now strayed from the path and you know, opted to break the law. Of course, the law itself is set by the world government, and they're like, you can't study the poneglyphs. So why can't we study the poneglyphs? You just can't. It's illegal. So that's kind of faulty logic there. But Professor Clover begins to go on about this ancient kingdom, and he's like, we've been researching these poneglyphs, and it turns out that the poneglyphs, the message is being passed down seemingly from this kingdom. And they didn't choose to pass down this message via, you know, regular stone tablets. Like, they could have etched their findings or their messages onto that, or they could have written them down on parchment or paper. But no, instead they chose to write them down on these giant stone slabs that were indestructible. You couldn't break them no matter what. And the reason that Clover hypothesized is because they did that is because that ancient kingdom must have had an enemy so powerful that they figured even after the kingdom had been gone, they would track down this message and destroy it. So that's why the poneglyphs had to be indestructible. Okay, and so this is getting the Gorosei a little bit more nervous as he's going on with this explanation. You can kind of tell the Gorosei are kind of like, oh shit, he knows. He knows. He found out. Oh, crap. And he keeps going on and on about this country. He's like, it was a huge nation and this ancient civilization. They invented all these crazy things. It was connected to the ancient weapons and all that stuff. And the knowledge they probably achieved was much greater than maybe even we have now. And he's going on and on about this. And he's like, and the name of that great civilization was... And that's when the Gorosei cut him off. He's like, kill him! And that's when Clover gets shot in the chest and he goes down. So, that's kind of interesting, don't you think? That right when Clover was about to utter the name of the nation, that's the breaking point. That's the moment where, like, no, we can't let him say that word. Shoot him dead now. Nobody can hear the name of that place. Okay? So that's kind of weird, because you'd think if this was some ancient lost civilization during the Void Century, which was between 800 and 900 years ago, if everybody forgot about this, if the history had been wiped, why would the name of the civilization matter? Like, let me give you an example. If there was some lost civilization that humanity never knew about, of which there were several. I mean, we can't know everything that happened in our prehistory before our ancestors started to, you know, write stuff down, you know, before, you know, there could have been plenty of ancient lost civilizations that are out there in the world waiting to be discovered. Imagine if I came to you and said there was this ancient lost civilization in the Mediterranean Sea tens of thousands of years ago, and it was called Gagayago. Just came up with that name, but it's like, oh, okay, it was called Gagayago. It's lost. No one knows that name anymore, so how does... And nothing's written about it, so how would the name be significant? So I think what's going on with the Ancient Kingdom is that the name of that kingdom, or at least the location of the civilization, it's still around. Like the ruins of that place. It's still around. And if someone... It's a name that people would recognize if you said it. Okay? Bear with me. I think the Ancient Kingdom is Raftall. Okay? I think it lines up. Raftall is this mysterious phantom island. People have heard about it in legend. The king of the pirates went there, Roger. The story of Raftall is probably all over the Grand Line. Some people might just think it's a myth. Some people, like Luffy and the other Straw Hats, believe it's real, and they're going to try to find it, as well as other members of the Supernovas. But it's not an island that's easy to get to. You can't just sail to Raftall. The Marines can't just hop into their sea prism stone-lined ships and just arrive at Raftall. You can't just even if flying machines did exist, you probably just can't build a plane or a hot air balloon or something and just float to Raftall. It's probably hidden somewhere. You can't get to it by easy means, alright? So I'm going to assume that place, Raftall Island, maybe just the name of the island was Raftall, the civilization had a different name, but it was a really big civilization, and it was like the Romans back in the day. The ancient Romans, they were very much advanced compared to other nations at the time. The Romans had things like heated floors. They were very advanced in terms of warfare, you know, the tactics that they employed on the battlefield, collecting knowledge, the spoken word, the written word. The Romans were kind of ahead of the time there, and they lived, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago. there were nations that were still building, like, with sticks and mud by the time the Romans were in power, and they had the ability to do all the things that they were doing and build these incredibly complex structures and all that stuff. Maybe the Ancient Kingdom was like that. They had technology that might rival current One Piece. They might even go beyond that. And then when that empire was wiped out by the world government, they were enemies, all that technology was lost, and they kind of got, pushed back a few thousand years, and the world government didn't advance as much as they did. Maybe it might be something like that. But if the ancient island was Raftall, I can imagine that, and they might, the Straw Hats are going to arrive there, and there'd be ruins everywhere of this place. Robin would freak out, and hey, who's to say that the civilization is necessarily completely wiped out? Maybe there might be still people living on Raftall. I know we picture Raftall as this island that when the Straw Hats get there, it's just going to have the One Piece, there might be some ruins, it's not going to be like a really thriving city, but who says it isn't? Maybe Raftall was just part of the Ancient Kingdom. Maybe it was like the one safe place they could go after the world government took over, because it's so hard to get to, it's like hidden away, and then the rest of the kingdom was taken over by the world government. Maybe something of that nature. If not Raftall, then I could see the Ancient Kingdom maybe being related to a sky island in some way, because we all know ancient ruins in like Shandia and everything like that. Maybe part of it's in the sky or something like that, going on. I can't imagine it's a place the Straw Hats have already visited. I can't imagine it's a place that they're just gonna like casually run into, like, oh, by the way, here's the ruins of this ancient city that Clover mentioned. I think it's gonna be very significant later down the line. And it was mentioned by Neko Mamushi that the poneglyphs, the actual stonemasons that carved the message into the poneglyphs, that was the Kozuki clan from Wano. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the messages that are on all the poneglyphs were the messages by the Kozuki clan, or it was from Wano. It appears that the message did come from this ancient kingdom. They're the ones that actually wrote down what they wanted to be on the poneglyphs, and it was just that maybe they were allies of Wano, which, hey, makes perfect sense. Wano is a country, one of the few countries that is not allied with the world government. So back in the day, thousands of years, well, not thousands of years ago, but back during the Void Century, about 800 or 900 years ago, Wano and the Ancient Kingdom were allied with one another, and when the world government started to take over, or when it looked like the world government was going to, wipe out their kingdom, they employed the Wano country and the Kozuki clan, write down this message on these indestructible stone slabs, and that's what they did. So, and that might be how, there's so much loyalty through the Kozuki clan, and through, I'm sure there's like different samurai clans and stuff in Wano and everything like that, but the Minks certainly are very steadfastly loyal to the cause. So I think that makes sense. I think that Raftall might be the Ancient Kingdom. The Ancient Kingdom certainly has ties to Wano and the Kozuki clan. Failing that, it might be related to a sky island in some way, or to the moon. We're going to get to that, don't worry. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Ancient Kingdom. So moving on now to the ancient weapons. I did a video about this previously, about the ancient weapons, but Clover mentioned, yeah, the ancient weapons are tied to the ancient kingdom. This is something that got me thinking about this kingdom being very highly advanced, kind of like the Romans or some ancient civilization. The ancient weapons, Pluton, we know that's a giant, like, fuck-off battleship that can level an island in one shot. We know Poseidon is not really a weapon in the traditional sense. It's the ability that a mermaid princess has, in this case Shirahoshi, who is Poseidon, that has the ability to control all these various sea kings. We do not know what Uranus or Uranos is, however you want to pronounce that. We do know that Pluton was constructed in Water 7, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the idea for it and everything originated from Water 7. It could be the same kind of deal with Wano in the Ancient Kingdom. The Ancient Kingdom had the blueprints, the idea for Pluton. It's the great minds that were working in this advanced civilization that came up with the concept for it. But they, went over to Water 7 or whatever Water 7 was looking like back then. I'm sure it might have gone by a different name or something. It probably looked very different. And then they're the ones that actually constructed the thing. But in terms of like where the idea came from for Pluton and where Pluton was kept after it was constructed in Water 7, that would have been the Ancient Kingdom. So yeah, let's just talk about, I already made the video about this and I kind of went into my discussions of what I think Uranus is and Uranus or whatever you want to say. But I think it's going to be be related to the moon. I think it's going to be some sort of flying machine. Like I said, there's not very many flying machines in One Piece. There's Eneru's Maxim, which is kind of limited to him. Yeah, you got things like the flying fish, you got certain devil fruit abilities that grant flight, but nothing like major. Nothing like a giant mobile fortress, you know, from the sky that can launch, you know, some serious firepower down on the planet and scorched earth. Nothing like that, you know. I think Uranus is going to be something like that. I think it's going to be something related to the moon, maybe relating to what Eneru's doing right now, and it's going to be some giant weapon that's going to be able to fly, and it's going to be able to just to drop bombs and just absolute death and destruction upon it. I think the major question, though, about all this is if the ancient weapons, if that's something the kingdom did have, how come they lost the war? Or perhaps it might be something like they knew they could use the weapons, but they chose not to. Perhaps the ancient kingdom, you know, had faith that the will of D would carry on. The D clan would somehow, you know, liberate the world from the world government at some point. Maybe they could have won. Maybe they's like, if we utilize Pluton and Poseidon and Uranus, maybe if we use all these ancient weapons and put them together, we could defeat the world government, but this power might completely destroy the world, or it might seriously set us back, and we don't want that. Rather, we're going to make a gamble, and we're not going to use these ancient weapons to destroy the entire world. Rather, we're going to just maybe hide them away, keep their location secret through the poneglyphs, and then hopefully, eventually down the line, that's when that's when the people are going to rise up. The revolutionaries are going to fight back against the world government, and then everything will be good. Everything will go back to the way it was before that, you know. I think they would have had to use the ancient weapons at one point so they could get their reputation. Maybe they did use Pluton to destroy an island or two, and it's like, okay, that, you know, the songs are sung of the ancient weapon Pluton, god of death, for centuries to come. Poseidon is like a living being, so it's easy to understand that power. Everybody on Fishman Island got an upfront display on how that functions with Shirahoshi's cry, and as for Uranus, we have no idea. So I would go to my video on the ancient weapons if you want more information just specifically about those. But in connection with that, we also have Joyboy. Now, Joyboy is very interesting because he's a great YouTuber that has like over 110,000 subscribers, and you should totally check him out in the description below. But something else that makes him interesting is he's the only named person that we know of that lived during the time of the Void Century, aside from Poseidon, but that's the Poseidon, the title of the ancient weapon. We don't really know the name of the mermaid princess. Like, the current holder of the Poseidon title is Shirahoshi, but her name is Shirahoshi. I'm sure that the actual weapon, Poseidon, might have had a different name as well, but in terms of just a human, Joyboy is the only person we know. That might not even have been his actual name. It might have just been an epithet or some nickname he went by or whatever. But we don't know anything about him. We just know that he had a connection with Poseidon, and he made a promise to her that he failed to, live up to during his own lifetime, and that the Noah, this giant wooden ship, plays a part in this in some way, shape, or form. And there's the Promise Day that's going to come, and it involves the Sea Kings. They know about it, but beyond that, we have no idea. I mean, I'm sure Robin probably knows a little bit more, because we don't find out like every little thing that she read on that poneglyph. She just mentioned that like Joyboy had a promise, and I'm sure the promise, like the nature of it, is written there in some way. It's maybe just Robin never brought it up. But yeah, if we're gonna have like a flashback arc to the Void Century, perhaps we'll take the perspective of Joyboy, get to see who that was, and because we don't know anybody that was alive that long ago. I mean, keep in mind, this is centuries before Roger or Rayleigh or Whitebeard or anybody. This was a long fucking time ago, which makes me think it's probably gonna be a little while before we find out anything about the Void Century. I mean, a few more years, at least. Maybe Oda wants to build, maybe in the years leading up to like, okay, I'm finally going to talk about the Void Century, I maybe want to build up a few more people that lived during that era. I think maybe something like that before we really get down to the nitty-gritty. The world government. Okay, this is kind of self-explanatory, right? So the world government came into being 800 years ago, right at the end of the Void Century. So something happened during that gap that allowed them to rise to power. We know that it's 20 families. We know that the Doflamingo family and the Nefertari family were some of these families. The Nefertari family was weird, though. After the families founded the world government and they all moved to the Holy Land, Marijwa, the Nefertari family decided to cast away that status and live on in their own kingdom, which was Alabasta, which they've probably already resided there for a few centuries beforehand. All these kingdoms existed previously to the founding of the world government, so probably even before the Void Century, Alabasta was a nation. In fact, I was just watching the 8th movie last night with my fans on movie night, and Cobra states that he was the 12th generation king of the country. And some quick and dirty math on this, and it's just like, oh, okay, so that's, you know, each king, depending on how long they reign, that's maybe about, from going as far back as the Void Century, that's like maybe each king lived about 66 years or something. But you have to consider that people live a lot longer in One Piece, so Alabasta existed, you know, before the Void Century, most likely. They just chose to stay there after the world government was founded. Now, obviously, because the world government makes it such a crime to study the poneglyphs and anything relating to the Void Century, there's some stuff that went down there that they are not too proud about. Some stuff that they do not want the people to know, and they protect this so carefully that if this information were to ever be released on what the world government actually did, then the people would probably turn against them. Like, they were pretty confident that they were going to turn against them if they did that. So it's probably not something as simple as just, like, the world government decided to form a government and they took out a few nations along the way. No, I'm sure it's something really bad. Like, we might be talking about, like, end of the world kind of stakes here, where the world government, maybe they poked the bear at first. They decided to start this government. They wrecked a bunch of kingdoms, moved a bunch of people out of their homelands, things like think of the most horrible things that all these different governments and kingdoms have done throughout human history, and maybe, you know, round it all up in a single entity, and that's the world government in One Piece. Oda's made a lot of references to, like, you know, the Nazis throughout the story, and various, you know, campaigns of, like, you can look at the issue of how the Shandians are kind of chased out of their homeland in certain ways. You know, there's a lot of parallels here. So perhaps think of, like, the worst possible combination of like a government or a kingdom that has enacted some of the most horrible things upon mankind, and maybe that's what the government tried to do back then. And after everything was said and done, you know, history is written by the victors. The world government was the victor, and they're like, oh yeah, no, the world government was great. Yeah, the world was shitty before we showed up, and we saved everybody. Yeah, go world government, you know, so, yeah, for them to be that, and keep in mind, the world government has the entire military under their control, and the cipher pulls, and the warlords. They're not afraid of just a little bit of dissent, because there is a little bit of dissent. That's what the Revolutionary Army headed by Dragon is. They are so afraid of this information being made public, they might think their own military might turn on them if this information gets out. This is some serious high-stakes shit here, so don't think of it as just anything like trivial, just like, oh yes, well, the world government back in the day, they started to take over, and they killed like a few hundred people, and they created the world government, and that's the deep secret. No, it's something important. It's something really big. They might have gone so far as like, yeah, we set back human technology hundreds of years. We were on the cusp of discovering all this incredible stuff, but we wiped them all out, and we regressed us back to the Stone Age, and we had to build it back up from zero, and here we are now. Even the Marines at that point would be like, what the is wrong with you? We are gonna kill you at this point. I'm now picturing a future vision in my head where all the vice admirals are like just tossing away their justice coats, and the justice coats are on the ground, are getting like burned up, and they're like, kill the Gorosei, you know? Okay, what's next? Will of D. Okay, the Clan of D did a video about this too. We're kind of syncing everything up here. Go watch all my stuff! Go watch all my stuff! It's a little cringy, but I think you'll be okay. I think the Will of D was a family, like the D clan. Maybe not a family in the traditional sense, like they were all blood related, but a group that got together that maybe opposed the world government right when they were gaining power, during the Void Century. They were the original Revolutionary Army. That might be a better way to put it. And near the end of this, it was looking like they weren't going to win. Maybe they were tied with the Ancient Kingdom. It was looking like they weren't going to win. The world government was going to win. It's like, all right, we don't have a hope of winning this, so let's pass down this initial onto the next generation and see if they can handle it. And if they can't handle it, they'll pass the generation, they'll pass the initial down to the next generation, and so on and so forth, until eventually they do succeed. And what can the D stand for? Oda, I hope he actually explains what it actually does mean, but at the end of the day, it's the essence of the D that actually matters. I'm just going to continue to pelvic thrust while I talk about this. It's the essence of the D that actually matters, not the actual, abbreviation or what it's for. You know what I mean? Destroyer, deceiver, decapitator, whatever. We know that the D clan are the natural enemies of God. I'm sure God, in this sense, are the Tenryubito, the world nobles, the descendants of the original founders. So, I think it really has something to do with that. They were the original revolutionaries, passing on their initial to the next generations to try to take down the world government, which I think, spoiler alert, I think this generation's gonna succeed. Even if it's a way that's like Luffy. Luffy doesn't really want to straight up just burn the entire government to the ground. Luffy's not that kind of crazy. That's more a Blackbeard's thing. But Luffy still has an enemy of the world government. So it's like every member of the D clan might go about this a different way. Blackbeard's more direct, like, burn Marijois to the ground. And Luffy's just like, if they get in my way, I'm going to beat them down. That's how it goes. Dragon is a revolutionary. He's like, well, I'm going to try to rally the people and try to take them down that way instead of trying to take them down directly. Meanwhile, you have Garp, who's a D, who's a member of the Marines, working for the world government. So that's interesting there. I want to find out the past with Garp. There's a story there that needs to be known. Devil fruits. Ooh, this is an interesting one. So you know how some devil fruits, they make sense on how they would be like mystical, magical powers. Like, here's the power to manipulate fire. Ace isn't up there anymore. I thought it was my Ace poster. The ability to manipulate fire, like, that's something that you don't need any, like, kind of understanding of. Fire is a natural element, same with snow, same with ice, same with mud. Makes sense. But then you get to the devil fruits like the Buki Buki no Mi that allow you to manipulate, like, I could turn my body into a missile. It'd be like, does that really say magical, mystical fruit to you that was around for hundreds of thousands of years? So I'm thinking maybe the devil fruits were created during the Void Century, and the exact nature of a devil fruit, what they are, is going to be maybe a little bit less mystical than what we know about. And of course, Vegapunk was the one that cracked the nut on this one. He figured out how the devil fruits operate. Then you have Caesar, who's creating these knockoffs. So yeah, I think that the fruits are not like these things that have been around for like thousands or years, like since the beginning of the earth, anything like that, like mystical power. I think it's something that was maybe created during maybe in this advanced, kingdom, advanced civilization that existed. And just over the years, they were built up as this legend of magical, but in reality, how they work is very scientific, and there's a formula to this, and you can make them if you know how the formula works, which Vegapunk knows, and which, Caesar knows. So, interesting indeed. Let's see. I talked about the Revolutionary Army. The poneglyphs, just in the general sense, the poneglyphs, I'm kind of confused. You have these really big, huge, like, things, these stone slabs. They're not easy to get around, and yet they're scattered all over the world. I want to think this ancient kingdom really did exist in more than just one island. Maybe Raftall, like I stated, is like the last bastion of this place, but maybe the ancient kingdom was like scattered all over the world in some way, and that's how these poneglyphs are everywhere. There was one in Alabasta, there was one on O'Hara, they're on the freaking ocean floor, there was one up in the sky, although the one up in the sky was originally on the ocean. I think what's going to happen with the poneglyphs, really, is that we're going to find out that all of this stuff, humans included, humanity as a whole, came from the moon, because that was kind of already stated that what was the case. But we're talking pre-Void Century here. We're talking maybe thousands of years ago, where humanity originated on the moon, and then they moved to the Earth because of a lack of resources. That ancient city that's up there, that's Eneru's around right now in the Autonoma army, that wasn't around since the Void Century. That's been around for quite some time. And the moon city up there, that's indicative of the level of technology they had. They had the technology to make these automata and all these advanced, things like they run on electricity and all that stuff. This is technology that I don't think would have existed, 800-900 years ago, or maybe even thousands of years ago, but it clearly did. So, yeah, I really want to cut back to Eneru, because I want to see Eneru with his massive army, and, like, he's flying back down to the Earth, and he figured out everything. He found out how, like, the true history of everything at this point, and he confronts the Gorosei at Marijois. Like, how much would you cream yourself if you see Eneru on the Maxim with his entire army of automata just landing at Marijois on top of the Red Line, and he's just staring down the Gorosei from atop of his battleship like, doing that crazy glare he does, and the Gorosei are like, who the hell's this Joker? And Eneru arrives, and he's like, I found out some things. And then, like, a big war happens between the Gorosei, or not the Gorosei directly, but the world government and Eneru, and there's this huge battle or something. Maybe Eneru eventually ended up getting beaten back or something, but then that's the catalyst for how we find out about the Void Century. That would be the way to do it! So that's pretty much everything I have for you guys today. The more we find out about this stuff in the future, I'll make more videos about it, like the Ancient Kingdom, when we find more about that. When we find out more about the Moon City, I'll make a video about that and all that good stuff there. Leave your comments below on any of the topics I discussed, or what you think about them, or any topics I failed to bring up, or what do you think is going to go on with Joyboy, what do you think is going to happen to the world government, or the Devil Fruits, or what are the revolutionaries, what's the Will of D, what's the Moon City. A lot of discussions to be had with this topic in a broad sense. So thanks for watching, everybody, and this will be Tekking101 signing out. Keep watching the skies. I mean skies.